Right then, so I'm going to dive into the very exciting and thrilling world of cables. So it's really hard to dress this up as a subject, and I didn't want to do a whole YouTube video on it because there are plenty of YouTube videos out there that talk about the science of cables and the different technologies and all those kind of things. So what I wanted to do is really sort of take 10 or 15 minutes just to kind of talk about the very high level basics of cabling for your old consoles. So if you are thinking about going out there and buying a retro console, then thinking about what cables you need to plug in the back, rather depressingly and rather boringly, is something that you do need to consider. Now, obviously, if you're going to go for a Raspberry Pi, or you're going to go for an Evercade, or you're going to go for something more modern, so you don't need to worry about it. You've got good old HDMI. HDMI is pretty much everywhere now. It is an absolute miracle format. It's completely widely supported. It's an international standard. So basically, if you're playing on anything from the PS3 upwards, so the Xbox 360 is a weird one because that has that you could get an HDMI version of that one later in its cycle, and actually if I do pick up an Xbox 360, I think for simplicity that's probably what I'm going to look for. So yes, so yeah, if you're picking up something sort of post kind of 2008, 2007, 2008, HDMI is going to be a winner. As I mentioned before, if you pick up the mini consoles, then yeah, that's what I was just looking for. Yeah, if you pick up the mini consoles, they will typically have HDMI in the back. The only time HDMI might become a bit of a problem, just something to watch out for, is there's also mini HDMI as well. And if you pick up a Raspberry Pi, definitely worth picking up. They come with sort of very small HDMI connector, but you can buy a lead for that and it just plugs straight into your TV. That's nice and easy. HDMI, very straightforward. One of the things, if you decide that you want to go and buy some older consoles, you will immediately discover is that most consoles come with what is called a composite. Right? Yeah, composite. That's right. I always remember the thing. Composite cable. This will be very familiar to you. So this is the Xbox connector. Now, as I mentioned, just want to say this. Very first time owning an Xbox, the connector on this is massive. Why is that so huge? Like, you know, I've got other connectors over here, so that's the connector side for the N64 and the Gamecube and the SNES. I mean, it's like, why does it need to be so massive? Everything about the Xbox is enormous. The Xbox is enormous. The connector is enormous. The controller is enormous. Everything about it is enormous, and it weighs a ton. I kind of, you know, I was a typical Sony fanboy back in the day, so I never even entertained the Xbox. Having said that, this first Xbox, it's an absolute joy. I've really enjoyed actually having a go on it, and of course, because I've never played a lot of the games before, I'm playing them for the first time. So that's going to be quite fun when I come to review some of those. You know, I will be reviewing them for the first time. So where you might be thinking, oh my goodness me, he's already terrible at these games he says he's played and was good at back in the day, these will be games I've never even played before, so you can imagine there's going to be carnage. But yeah, so anyway, back to the topic. These are cables that you will be familiar with, this red, white and yellow cable. So basically the red and the white are your right and left audio, and the yellow, this one single cable. So these, for your 2 channels of purely your audio, this yellow cable carries all of the data relating to video. So, and it's basically just on this little pin in the middle here. So around the outside is just the earth. So this little pin in the middle here is carrying the entire data of your video signal. So as you might imagine, on a modern TV, which is capable probably for most of you of supporting 4K, at the very least 1080p, this is like about a quarter of that, and the signal is rubbish. Now, of course, the other problem is also compounded by the fact that you can no longer generally plug these into your TV. You can plug these into a little SCART converter if you've got a TV old enough to take SCART, and some TVs will also take these, some older flat panel TVs, but actually those older flat panel televisions that even take these, you'll find that the quality is not particularly good. Those TVs weren't great at turning these into digital signals. That's the problem. These are analog signals, very poor ones. And so I very quickly discovered, after I plugged into my little retro scaler, which I've shown you before, so this is how I get these into a HDMI. So basically I've got HDMI out on there, I plug these into here, get HDMI out, select the input, and throw into the TV. And the first time I did that, I was absolutely devastated. The picture quality was terrible. On universally pretty much everything. So I thought to myself, okay, well, what's the best I can do? What are the options? For a lot of consoles, sort of late 90s, early 2000s, there are some other options that you've got. So in the interest of keeping it simple, I have here the Xbox equivalent, which actually only just came. So again, enormous connector. This one actually comes with five connectors instead. So you've got your audio ones here, and you've got these three ones here. Now it's red, green, and blue. It doesn't actually mean it carries the red, green, and blue signal. I won't go into the science of this, but basically, it's telling the TV essentially other things like brightness, luminance, that kind of stuff. So you've actually got three cables now carrying your analog signal to your television. Now you still can use the retro scaler or any RetroTink device or anything else that you've got, as long as it supports these sorts of cables. Now these are typically called component. So you've got composite, which is the red, white, and yellow, and component, which is this. These carry a much better signal to your console. Now, this is where it starts to get a little bit complicated, because not all consoles will support this, and it doesn't always necessarily follow the age, and it also depends on which region your console is from as well, as to what sort of things it supports. So I'm going to try and keep this as simple as I possibly can. In terms of region, there were typically two. So you had PAL, which was largely the European standard, and you had NTSC, which was largely the American and Japanese standard. Again, I won't go into the science of that. Consoles would typically support different standards depending on where you bought them from, and it depended on the console as well. So definitely go and have a look. If you're buying an old console, go and have a look at what things it outputs. Some of the NTSC consoles, so some of the Japanese and American consoles, supported a format called S-Video, which is sort of like, it's still component basically, but it's all in one lead, and it kind of separates out the signal, but in one lead. It's like a little sort of, if you ever remember the old PS2 connectors that you used to get on the, like, for your keyboard and mouse, it's a similar sort of connector, a bit bigger than that. A lot of consoles supported that. A lot of consoles in my region, in the PAL region, didn't support S-Video, so your choices were typically limited to composite or component. So yes, that's what I've been buying for a lot of consoles. So just in terms of which consoles support that, so the Xbox, obviously, the original Xbox supports component. The Xbox 360 supports component, or if you buy a new one, HDMI. The PS2 will also support both, and actually if you start your PS2 up and you don't go straight into a game, you can go to the settings and you can actually switch it over, and you'll see it. It's like you can either have it as composite or the other option, which is, you see it as like, I'm trying to remember this now, YCBY something or other. I can't remember. I always forget. I've seen it written a million times. Can never remember what it is. Put it on that setting. The output difference on the PlayStation 2 for component is like night and day. Makes a big difference. PS1 doesn't seem to support that. Mega Drive doesn't seem to support that, so you are kind of stuck with, certainly in the PAL region, you are stuck with composite. I think the PS1 supports S-Video in NTSC, but you'd need to check that. I think it might also support RGB via Skype. I can't remember, but I haven't been able to get the PS1 looking better. Nice thing about the PS1, of course, is that you can play PS1 games on the PS2, and if you have a PS3, you can also play them on the PS3, and the PS3, of course, is HDMI. So there are some definite benefits there. Although weirdly, I tried playing a game on my PS3, and it just was not loaded fine on the PS1. Very strange. So other options available to you. So this is something I picked up for the Nintendo consoles. So I picked up actually for the Wii. I have picked up a component cable for the Wii separately, but what's worth remembering is that the N64, the Gamecube, and the SNES all support the same basically plug on the end here. This AV out is supported on all three of those consoles, which is great because you could buy a single device for all three. Now this was a little bit pricier. This one was £60 and it's called a RetroTink 2X. And basically this is specifically for Nintendo consoles. So you can buy a RetroTink device. It's a bit like the Retro Scaler, a bit more expensive, better quality, but it's like, 3 or 4 times the price, at least, maybe more than that actually. This one is basically the same sort of electronics, but just specifically for the Nintendos. The reason I decided to fork out £60 for this one is because it covers 3 different consoles. So instead of buying 3 separate leads for each one, I've just got this one. It's a great little device. You literally plug it in the one end. It's self-powered, and it detects, basically what it will do is detect the best possible signal out from all your Nintendo consoles, and then give you a mini HDMI out, which you can plug straight into your TV. This works fantastically with the Gamecube. The Gamecube actually has a digital out. I have not been able to find a cable for that anywhere. So this does really, really well for the Gamecube and the SNES. Weirdly though, the N64 doesn't have RGB out. So even though it's kind of newer than the SNES, the output is less good. So this will just take basically the, I think it just take for the PAL region. I think in NTSC it will take S-Video, but here it will just basically take composite and do a good job of upscaling. It's okay. It's kind of the best you can really do at this point. There is a mod that you can do for the N64 where you get a little board and you basically solder it onto the N64. One, I'm not very good at soldering, and two, I'm terrified about opening it up and causing it to get damaged. So I'm just going to live with it. This does a pretty good job, actually, even for composite for the N64. Composite weirdly works okay with the N64. Yeah, it seems to sort of get away with it for some reason. Some consoles just seem to work better than others. So that's the Nintendo solution. You can, of course, still buy other cables. One thing that I've noticed with the official cables for Nintendo is they are insanely expensive. I don't know why. I just don't know why. That's very odd. So that's the Nintendo option. A couple of options before I talk about my favourite. And I say my favourite, that's definitely in inverted commas. I'm going to talk to you about the Dreamcast in a moment, but just a couple of other things that you might want to get yourself as well. If you're thinking about plugging some of these consoles into your PC or your Mac and actually playing on the screens on there, you can do that. So there's a couple of options here. So as I mentioned, you'll need to get yourself something like this to get the input to HDMI. Then you can plug into like a video capture card, which is usually just a little dongle. They're relatively inexpensive. This one's a USB-C one. I think it comes with an adapter for the original USB format, but I've got USB-C on my computer, so that's fine. Literally, you can just you can do a video capture. Your computer will see this as like a webcam, and you can just open a screen and play on that. And for most consoles, it will just take the audio through this, and you'll get the audio come through your PC speakers, which is absolutely fine. There are some examples where that's not the case, and you can pick yourself up one of these, which is an audio capture card. Again, relatively inexpensive. The reason I have this is for the Dreamcast, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But basically, same sort of thing. So your red and white audio cables can go in there. It also takes a 3.5mm jack, and you plug that into the USB port in your computer, and it will see that as a microphone, basically, which is really handy. Also really useful if you've got things like, some old cassettes or vinyl or whatever that you wanted to capture on your computer. You can use that for that. So, Dreamcast. This has been a voyage of discovery for Dreamcast. So Dreamcast, I've got the standard cable that comes with Dreamcast, but Dreamcast has the rather cool ability to actually output to VGA. Now that's probably partly to do with the fact that it's essentially a little PC. It runs an old version of Windows called Windows CE, which is Compact Edition Windows, which is what you used to see in things like PDAs and stuff back in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. So I'm thinking to myself, well, VGA's got to be a better option than your composite, which of course it is. So getting a VGA cable for the Dreamcast was straightforward enough, actually, as it happens. So first thing I did was I went out, and I'm just going to unscrew all these bits and pieces here because, well, I can't actually as it happens, so I'm just going to show you what I've got. So Dreamcast connector, normal Dreamcast connector on the end. And I bought the Dreamcast lead, which is this thing here, which has got a VGA connector. Let's see if I can try and unplug, as you can see. Come off. Oh, there you have a look. There's also unscrewing the little mount screws as well, which have now come off. Oh, that was a mistake. I regret my decisions. There we go. Okay, so that's the VGA cable that it comes with. So VGA obviously doesn't carry audio, so hence the reason for the audio capture card. So you've got your VGA connector on the end there, and your two audio cables there. Again, relatively expensive. This came in the post. I was very excited. fantastic, I thought. I will just plug that into the Dreamcast, and I'll plug this end into the... Oh, yeah, how will I get this into my video capture card? Okay. Then I thought to myself, actually, I have a VGA to HDMI converter that I bought ages ago. Fantastic, sorted. I can plug it into that. So I plugged it into that. No dice. Right, okay. Then I looked at it and realised that it was a HDMI to VGA connector. Important but subtle difference, but the direction is incorrect, which means essentially it's for plugging in like a, I don't know, like if you wanted to plug your PS3 into an old VGA monitor, for instance, you would use it for that. I want to do it the other way around, which is I want to take a VGA device and plug it into something HDMI. Right, okay. So I then went out and I bought one of these, which is a VGA to HDMI converter. So it's got the little HDMI connector on the end and the VGA part there. You'll see there's this little thing plugged in here. This is the other thing I then discovered. So great, this arrived at the post, and I went to plug these two things in, and I went, oh, yes, they don't connect together. Fantastic. So I then had to go and buy a female to female VGA converter, again, relatively expensive. That came in the post. I was then able to plug those two things together. The final part of the conundrum was, where the heck do I plug the audio into? Now, most modern computers, as you'll know, will not have these red and white connectors in the back. I had already bought a composite audio to 3.5mm jack, plugged that into the computer. That also didn't work, largely because I think it's supposed to only just be for headphones. So I then had to buy this, which is the audio capture card, which I mentioned before. So I've got that plugged into one USB, and I have the other lead plugged into the other side. Now, that all sounds very complicated, but to summarise for you, the things you would need to buy for the Dreamcast to get VGA is the Dreamcast VGA cable, the female to female connector, which is super cheap. Usually get 2 in a pack. That costs about £3, about $5. A audio capture card, unless you have another way of getting that audio straight into a computer, and the VGA to HDMI converter, which also the final part of that, I realised that USB is there to power it, because if you don't power it, it doesn't work. So I plugged all of this stuff in, none of it came on. I was like, oh, I bought all this stuff and I've fiddled about for ages and it still doesn't work. Plugged it in, I thought, I wonder if that's for power. Plugged the USB in, it all powered on. Absolutely beautiful, totally worth it. So there is basically about 4 parts you need for the Dreamcast. So yeah, VGA cable, female to female converter, audio capture card if you need it, and VGA to HDMI adapter. So all in all, the total cost of the cables probably ends up being about £30 if you don't include the audio capture card, which I'll use for some other things as well. Yes, it is totally worth it. The difference is amazing. So VGA on the Dreamcast looks fantastic. So there you go. I said I wouldn't talk about it for too long. Just looking at the timer here, I've been speaking for about 18 minutes on cables. To summarise then, for the most part, you will have those composite cables. Remember those red, yellow and white ones. You're going to want to see if you can get RGB. Those will just give you, components. They're interchangeable terms. Those component ones, so that's the red, green, blue, and then the red and white audio one, so that's this one. If your console supports those, you're onto a winner. That will look so much better, even through a device like this, that will look so much better on your television. So definitely go for that. If you can stretch to it, I'll put the link in the description. I think it's Retro Gaming Cables, the company that sells these. They have loads of options, and they do these for other devices as well. One thing to bear in mind with these, if you've got a Mega Drive, it won't support the Mega Drive 1. It'll only support the Mega Drive 2, which is kind of annoying because I have a Mega Drive 1, which is kind of irritating. I am stuck with composite on that. But yeah, for most consoles, those 5-pin ones, so PS2, Wii, Gamecube, not Dreamcast, Gamecube, just looking at my consoles here, SNES, did I say the Wii? I think I did already. They all support that. Xbox 360, and I think the Saturn as well, the Sega Saturn as well, if you're lucky enough to have one of those, will all support that. Oh, and Xbox will also support that, those RGBs. So those are the ones to look out for. They are relatively inexpensive. Definitely go find them. The sort of relatively sort of £5, £6, £7 ones that you'll find on Amazon do the job absolutely fine. So don't worry too much about spending a lot of money there. There are lots of other expensive cabling options if you want them, but such as the Retro Ting. But hopefully that's a bit of a flavour. So even though I tried to keep it simple, there was still a lot to say, and that's because it's a complicated topic. Overall, you know, everything supports something different. It's lovely nowadays that everything is just HDMI. It just is so much better. So yes, hope that was helpful. So let's talk a little bit about abandonware.